Very good morning, students. So again, we are here with another topic in the case of circulatory systems. And this is a very important topic again, as per your examinations are concerned. And this is about the comparative anatomy of the aortic arches, or you can say the evolution of the aortic arches. So this is a altogether different topic from the evolution of the heart. So as in the previous lectures, we have talked about the evolution of the heart, the evolution in the number of the chambers, the evolution in reduction of the accessory chambers, or you can say some modifications in the conus and the truncus. So apart from those changes, this particular topic is about the evolution of the arches, which are the you can say the arteries which are, or the aorta which are coming out of the heart. So what is the evolutionary trend in the case of the aortic arches? That would be our this particular lecture upon. Now students, if I start with this particular topic, so first of all we have to see that what are aortic arches and why we have to go for the evolutionary phenomenon of this particular structure. Now students, we know that the heart has to pump its blood, whether it is deoxygenated blood or it is oxygenated blood. We had talked about the venous hearts also, which have got the single type of circulation in them. Then we had the formation of a double circulation mechanism in the fishes also, in the case of dipnonians, and we had kind of double circulation in all the amniotes later on in the evolution. So these aortic arches, they also have developed with the conditions of the heart and with the oxygenation, you can say, place. If you have a gill and you have a lung, then the aortic arches, they have developed in that particular manner that they have to take blood to the lungs also, and they are also taking the blood to the gills. So the number of the arches, they are different in different animals, and the placement of the aortic arches is also different in all the animals. So in this particular lecture, we'll be talking about all these situations in a particular this particular lecture. Now, the aortic arches, they are the paired blood vessels. Now, this is the main important first thing that you should know, that they are the blood vessels which are coming out of the heart, and they are taking the blood to some particular distant places at which they are like designated to take the blood. So this is the first thing, that what are aortic arches? They are the paired blood vessels that are arising from the heart. Now if I go further, they emerge from the ventricle of the heart. So as we all know that the auricles, they are giving their blood to the ventricles, and finally from the ventricle we are having these arches which are taking the blood to whole of the body. They can be systemic arches, they can be pulmonary arches which are going to the lung, they can be to the heart, to the head part, they can be the carotids which are going to the head. So we will be dealing with all these arches in the coming slides. So what is told over here is that these paired blood vessels, they are emerging from the ventricles of the heart. So if you have got two ventricles, they will be coming out of these two ventricles. If you have got a single ventricle, so there will be a single arch first of all, then it will be dividing further. Now if I go further in this slide, during the embryonic stages, now this is a very, very important thing, that when the aortic arches, they are developing in an embryo, they have got a plan of the development. So this is an important thing to understand, that we have a primitive plan of an aortic arches, of the aortic arches, and that primitive plan is having 6 aortic arches. And if you have any modification in the coming times, so those modifications will be seen in the adult animal, but in the embryos of all the animals, whether it is mammal or it is a bird or it is a reptilian or an amphibian, in the embryos of all these animals, there will be present 6 aortic arches in the embryo stage. So from this 6 stage or 6 aortic arches stage, different modifications will take place, and those modifications will be seen in the adult animals. So in the embryonic stages, what we have, that the aortic arches, they are similar in number and position in all the different vertebrates. So whether it is amphibian or reptilian or any other animal, the number will be same, the position will be same in all these animals of the aortic arches. Now students, as I've told you in the earlier slide, we have got an embryonic aortic arch plan. So this is called as a primitive plan of the aortic arches. So here in this particular slide, you can very well see that we have got a plan of 6 arches. So here you can very well see that we have got 6 arches. Number 1, this is the second arch, the third arch, fourth, fifth, and the 6th arch. So actually, what are the arches? So these are the arches which are present on both the sides. So that is a single arch which is going into this side, and it is going on to this side also. So that's why we call them as paired blood vessels that are coming out of the heart. Now here, one thing is very, very important, that like where is the heart present and how these arches, they are emerging out of the heart. Now here you can very well see that this is the ventral aorta which is present in the very center. This is the ventral aorta, and this ventral aorta is arising from the heart ventricle. That means at this particular place we'll be having the heart. So when the heart will pump the blood from this place, it will go into the ventral aorta, and it will be going into the arches on both the sides. In every arch, the blood will flow, and it will reach all the arches on all the directions. So these arches are the arteries into which the blood will flow from the heart. And when the blood is coming back like this, and they are coming into the dorsal aorta. So we have got 2 dorsal aortae, and they are joining together, and they are forming a single dorsal aorta which is going, you can say, to the whole body posteriorly. So here is the head part, and here we have the tail part or the caudal part or whatever part it is, depending upon the type of the animal. So here we have the heart, the blood flows towards the arches like this, then the blood will be coming back into the dorsal aorta, it will be coming into the single dorsal aorta, and it will be going back to the whole body. Now, this is a plan of the aortic arches. Now, if I go further, and in this particular slide, we have the 6 aortic arches. So during the embryonic stages, when these arches were being developed in an embryo, we had 6 pairs of aortic arches developed in that particular embryo of the animal. So suppose we have an adult, it has got 3 arches in the adult form. But in the embryo of that animal, we will be having 6 arches, and then 3 will be diminishing, and the adult will have the rest of the 3 arches left. Have you got the concept? So in the embryos of all the animals, we have 6 arches first of all developed, and then 3 will be diminishing, or 2 will be diminishing, or 1 will be diminishing, and the rest of the arches will be seen in the adult forms. Now these arches, they are named according to the name of the visceral clefts. This is a very important thing now. Now, what are the visceral clefts now, and what is the placement of these clefts? So they are present over here. Suppose if we take a fish, so fish have some gill slits which are very close to the mouth. So here we will be having the gill slits. So what will happen, that we know that in case of fishes, we have got a venous heart. So here in the heart, we will be having a deoxygenated blood. So when it will go into the ventral aorta, as we have seen in the, you can say, the evolution of the heart in case of fishes. So I have shown you a particular picture of injected afferents and injected efferents. So if you have that picture in your mind, so this is a similar condition. Now here we have the heart, the blood is flowing into the ventral aorta, then it is going into efferent vessels, and at this particular place it is being oxygenated. This is the place of gills, and when it will follow the oxygenation in the gills, it will return to this dorsal aorta. Now this dorsal aorta will have the oxygenated blood. It will flow to the whole of the body. So this is the mechanism, and this is how the blood is flowing in these visceral clefts, or you can say aortic arches. Now if I go further, how they are designated and how they are numbered. Now these are designated by Roman numerals, as we write 1 as like this. The first aortic arch is named as the mandibular arch. So if you go for the very first arch, it is called as the mandibular arch, because the mandible, it is the lower jaw, and this arch, it is reaching that mandible. So the arch which is at the level of the mandible will be called as the mandibular aortic arch. If I go further, it proceeds upward on either side of the pharynx. So this particular arch, it is proceeding upwards on the either side of the pharynx. Next, these arches, so if I talk about all these arches, and if I talk about only mandibular, so these arches, they are turning backwards. How? First of all, they are going like this, and then they are turning back. And when they are turning back, they are making the dorsal aorta. So they join to form the common dorsal aorta before the level of the heart. So this dorsal aorta will be giving the oxygenated blood to whole of the body. Now students, in this particular slide, I am just giving you the concept of the embryonic aortic arches and what is the plan, how they are named, and we had talked about the very first arch as the mandibular arch, and it has been written in the Roman numerals. You can very well see this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 number, and the number is starting not from the heart side, it is starting from the head side. So this is the first arch. So if we talk something about the plan, the first arch was the mandibular arch. Now the second aortic arch, it is the hyoid arch. The second one is named as the hyoid arch. Next, the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, they are termed as the branchial arches. So if you go from the third to the sixth arch, these are the branchial arches. So why they are called as branchial arches? Branchia, they are referring to as the gills. So these are at the level of the gills. First is at the level of the mandible, that's why it is mandibular. Second is the hyoid, it is at the level of the tongue. Third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, they are the branchial arches because they are at the level of the gills. So, first will be the mandibular. If I talk about second, it is the hyoid. And if I talk about third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, they are the branchials. So that is a primitive plan for the aortic arches which are present in the embryo of all the vertebrates when they are developing. Now, if I go further, what are the modifications of aortic arches in different vertebrates? Now, this is the actual topic and this is the evolution phenomenon. Now, as we have discussed the evolution of the heart, we started with the, suppose, two-chambered heart. Then we had a 2.5 chambered, then we have a 3-chambered, complete 3, then we have 3.5, then we had the complete 4-chambered heart. That was the modification in the heart. Now, here, what will be the modifications in the aortic arches? These modifications will be, now, if you see the evolution in the aortic arches, they tend to decrease in number. Now, this is a very important thing. They are not increasing in number, that we have a primitive plan, say, of 6 arches, and in evolution they have become 8, then 10, then 15 or 20. No. The trend in the evolution in the aortic arches is to decrease the number of the aortic arches. So what we have seen is a kind of retrogressive kind of a thing in the number of the aortic arches. So might be the reduction in the number of the aortic arches is somewhat related to higher efficiencies of the systems. So we need not to have more of the arches because we can cope up with the situation with the 3 or 4 arches. So there is no problem at all with 4 arches. We don't need 6. We need only 4 or we need only 3. So in evolution, the number of the aortic arches, they have reduced from a larger number of aortic arches. As we have seen in the case of amphioxus, if we try to grab that particular thing in amphioxus, I have shown you a particular picture of amphioxus in the evolution of the heart, that it is having more than 60 pairs of the branchial arteries. So these are the arches, those were the arches, and there are 60 pairs of arches. So that was a primitive kind of a feature in amphioxus, because there is a great need of oxygenation in those animals. So they have developed 60 pairs of arches. So what are the modifications? So I'll be taking up these modifications one by one. So I hope you are understanding the topic. So if I go with the modification, first of all, the number of the aortic arches is different in different adult vertebrates. I'm taking the adult vertebrates. So they are different in the adult vertebrates, but they are built on the same fundamental plan in the embryonic life. So I hope that you have understood the meaning of this particular line. So the aortic arches in all the adult vertebrates, they have been built upon the same fundamental plan or the primitive plan of 6 aortic arches. Now if I go further, the difference in the number of the aortic arches are due to the complexity of the heart circulation. Now again, we have discussed this point previously also, that why we have a reduced number, why we have some modification, and that modification is in the reduction of the number. Now why we have reduced number is due to some complexities in the heart, due to some complexities in the organ systems of different animals. So that's why we have the modifications in the aortic arches. Now if I go further, there is a progressive reduction of the aortic arches in the vertebrate series during the evolution. So that is very, very clear. I have told you in the previous sections that there is a reduction in the number of the aortic arches. They are not increasing in number, though they are decreasing in number in the evolution. Now, here we are talking about the aortic arches in the primitive kind of vertebrates, as we have started the evolution of the heart in the case of Amphioxus. Now, here also we are starting with the primitive vertebrates, and if you go with this particular slide, so again we are starting with the Amphioxus. Now this particular animal, it had developed about 60 pairs of aortic arches. So these were very large in number, because this is the pharynx region, or this is the pharyngeal or the branchial part of the Amphioxus, where it is oxygenating. So we have seen in Amphioxus that we have a single ventral aorta in this case. We have got 2 dorsal aortae on the upper side, and we had efferent arteries going into the gill section over here, and efferent arteries, they are leading to efferent ones, and they are reaching the dorsal aorta. So that was shown in that particular picture. So what we had, the case in Amphioxus, that we had a ventral, you can say, aorta. From the ventral aorta, we had some branches, the aortic arches, which are going to the dorsal aorta. So then the blood was flowing back to the body and towards the anterior sides, towards the head part. So that was the case in Amphioxus. We had 60 pairs of aortic arches in between the ventral and the dorsal aortae. That is the particular diagram for which I was talking about. So that we had seen in the case of the evolution of the heart. So here we have the ventral aorta, we have 2 dorsal aortae, and we have got numerous aortic arches. So these are 60 in pairs. Now students, next animal that we are taking is the Petromyzon. So Petromyzon has got only 7 pairs of aortic arches. Now this animal has reached the primitive plan. It is very close to the primitive plan of 6 arches, but it is having still it is having one more arch. That can be the branchial arch. So Petromyzon has got 7 pairs, and if I go further, the Myxine, it has got 6 pairs of aortic arches, and it is in the adult Myxine. That means the embryo will have a 6 arch plan, and they are retained in the adult form. 6 are going into the adult form. So the adult Myxine will have the 6 arches. Amphioxus has got 60 pairs because the arches, they have divided into many, and they have developed 60 pairs. Petromyzon has developed 7 pairs. So that is the case in all these animals. Now if I go further for fishes, As we have seen, the myxine and the petromyxon, they have got 7 and 6 pairs of aortic arches. Now, what is the case in fishes, typical fishes? Now, first of all, I am taking the case of elasmobranchs. Now, if you have the cartilaginous fishes, what is the case of the aortic arches in the elasmobranchs? Now, here, students, what we have is if we take the primitive elasmobranchs, suppose I am taking the example of heptanchus, hepta, it refers to 7. So hexa is 6, heptanchus is having 7 pairs of aortic arches. Whereas the coelacanths, so that is again a group of fishes, coelacanths, they have got 6 pairs of aortic arches. So that is the primitive plan also. So here I am taking another example of heptanchus. We have the petromyxon also with 7 pairs. Now, if we go further in elasmobranchs, what we have that in most of the sharks, which are the elasmobranchs or the scoliodon, they have 5 pairs of functional aortic arches. Now, students, this is a most important thing to note, that in these elasmobranchs or the sharks or the modern sharks, you can say, example is the scoliodon. So they have a reduced first pair of the aortic arches. So why they have a reduced first pair of aortic arches? Because the first pair can be the non-functional gill types. As the very first arch will have the non-functional gills, so by the time the arches to those non-functional gills, they have been reduced in evolution. So as they have reduced, we have a reduced number of the aortic arches also. So we don't have 6 pairs of aortic arches in these sharks or scoliodons. We have got 5 pairs because the very first pair is reduced or it has been disappeared in evolution. So what we have in these elasmobranchs, so we don't have number 1 arch. So here I have demarcated number 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So these numbers of arches, they are present in the adult forms, but we are lacking the arch number 1. So it has disappeared in the case of elasmobranchs. Now students, going further, if I talk about the teleosts, so these are the lung fishes, these are the bony fishes. So in the teleosts, what we have, if we take the concept of the aortic arches in teleosts, so in most of these bony fishes, the first and the second aortic arches, they tend to disappear. So, but we are left with. So in the evolution, these teleosts, they have lost their first and the second aortic arches. So these have a number which is the 3, 4, 5 and 6. So as you can very well see in this case, the arch number 1 and the arch number 2, they have been lost. So they have not been formed here. You can make them with dotted line. So they are reduced. So they are gone. So what we have is that we have got a number which is 3, 4, 5 and 6. So we don't have 1, we don't have the 2. So these 2 have disappeared, and the 4 of the aortic arches, they are functional in case of the bony fishes. So here you can very well see, here we have written efferent branchial artery and the efferent branchial artery. The heart is present over here. This is the ventral aorta. So from the ventral aorta, you will be having the afferent branchioles which are going into the gills, and efferent branchioles will leave the gill and they will be coming, the blood will be flowing into the dorsal aorta. So after coming back to some distance, both will be joining together to form a single dorsal aorta in case of bony fishes. So here we don't have the first and the second aortic arch. Now, here one thing I must give you the concept of that what is this particular thing which is going upwards. So this is the part of the dorsal aorta which is going towards the head side. So this is called as the carotid arch, or you can say the carotid artery, I should say. So carotids, they are going to the head of the animal. So in pictures you must have seen that whenever a person dies, then some person will feel the pulse in the neck of that person. So we have two carotids which are going laterally in our neck to the head. So they are highly pulsatile and you can feel the pulse in that particular artery very well in the neck part. So these are the carotids which are going up to the head or to supply the brain of the animals. We have got two arteries here also. So these are the external carotids. These are the internal carotids. So we have got a pair of carotids which are going to the head part and to the brain. Now students, a question comes to my mind that why this is the external carotid and this is the internal carotid. But if we see it from here in the picture, this seems to be as the external one and that should be the internal one. But the reason for giving its name as the external carotid is because when we dissect the animal, suppose we cut the animal from this particular site and we open one side just like this, and this carotid will come onto the external side when it will be opened like this. So when you cut the animal, you open the animal, so this particular carotid will come exteriorly, and that's why it is called as the exterior or external carotid, and this is the internal carotid. So these are going to the brain. So students, that was the case of the fishes, and after fishes we have got the case in the polypterus. So this is a special case that has been taken over here. So as this particular case refers to the lung fishes, so there is a special modification in the aortic arches also. So if we take this particular case, what we have is that due to the mode of terrestrial, you can say the mode of respiration has changed in these fishes. From aquatic to the terrestrial, the first aortic arches, they disappeared, and thus there are the third, fourth, and sixth aortic arches which are functional. So students, in this particular case, what has been seen is that in lung fishes, so if we take the case of the Dipnonians, as we have taken in the evolution of the heart, so here we have the formation of the air bladder. So they will be taking the oxygen from the lungs also. So in this particular case, we have got a number of the aortic arches reduced from the previous one also. So here we have 1 and the 2 reduced. So there are no 1 and 2, and there is no fifth also. So we have the third, fourth, and sixth arches functional. Now a set of the pulmonary artery which will be going to the lung, it arises from the sixth aortic arch near the dorsal aorta. So this is the most important thing that you should grab upon, that a set of pulmonary artery, because they have got lungs, so a pulmonary artery will arise from the sixth arch. This is a very important thing. So it is arising from the sixth arch near the dorsal aorta, and fifth one, it will be diminished. So if we take the case of these lung fishes, we have got a number 3, 4, and 6. So there is no 1, there is no 2, there is no 5. So we have got only 3 arches functional in case of the Dipnonians. As the sixth arch, the sixth aortic arch, it will be forming the pulmonary artery. And what about the third one? The third will be forming the carotid arteries, which will be going to the head part. As we don't have 1 and 2, so the carotids will be formed by the third arch. Fourth will be forming the systemic arch, which will be going to the body. And sixth will be going to the lungs. So that is the kind of a modification in case of these fishes. So if we take again the number of the arches and their function, the third pair of arch will be forming the dorsal aorta backwardly and carotids towards the heads. If we go for the fourth, these arches will be giving the blood to the body, making systemic arches. The sixth will be forming the pulmonary artery, which will be going to the lungs for oxygenation. So that is the case of the lungfishes. So rest of the cases will be taken in the second part of the lecture. So have a good day. Thank you.